Resurgent India Knowledge Series presents virtual session on innovative approaches to climate financing, building a sustainable future. Mr. Ashish Agrawal, Director, Resurgent India Limited. Chartered accountant and management graduate Ashish Agrawal has a rich experience of more than 25 years in financial sector. He has an extensive knowledge in credit and investment banking, corporate finance, capital market operations, foreign exchange services, debt syndication, wealth management and financial advisory services. Mr. Ankit Kedia, Founder, Capital A. Ankit Kedia is an award-winning Indian entrepreneur, best known as the former promoter director at Manjushri Technopack Limited, India's largest rigid plastic manufacturing organization with revenues of $500 million. Mr. Atif Syed, Project Lead for Green Building South Asia, International Finance Corporation. Mr. Syed leads IFC's Green Building Market Transformation Program in South Asia, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, on development of the green building sector through policies, voluntary standards, capacity building and investment opportunities. His current focus is on implementation of IFC's EDGE, Excellence in Design for Greater Efficiencies, the fastest growing green building certification system in the world. Ms. Dharini Mathur, Sustainable and Climate Financing Consultant. Dharini is currently an advisor and a freelance consultant to sustainability and impact-focused funds and multilateral organizations on various aspects of climate and sustainable finance strategy and structuring. Prior to this, she spent over a decade at the International Finance Corporation, the World Bank Group, advising on execution of transactions and engagements across Asia. Mr. Ashish Patel, Managing Partner, Avishkar Capital. Ashish Patel is the Managing Partner Credit at Avishkar Capital and leads the Africa market, where he drives the vision of the ESG First Fund forward. An industry veteran, he has been involved with growth companies for over 20 years and has strategic, operational and investment experience.
Good evening, friends. A very warm welcome to all of you. This today's webinar, which is on very important topic, the current scenario, which is a global topic, not a topic for India itself, where I think a lot of things are happening across the globe. Our government has already taken the proactive steps on this side, and we are trying to do a lot. So, as Resurgent India, we thought that let us organize a discussion webinar under the knowledge series on this important topic, where all the stakeholders can come together and discuss what are what is the progress till now and what are the challenges on the climate financing. So climate financing is one area, but we need to see for the enabling financing, what are the other challenges or other ingredients which are needed, which we need to discuss and debate, and then we can find out the solutions. What are the solutions for the innovative approaches or innovative climate financing for the building a sustainable future, actually. So, as you know, that at COP26, India announced a net zero emissions target by 2070. So, for meeting out these targets, we need to do a lot, actually, but where the financing will be a game changer. And as per the estimate, but I was seeing in some articles that we need at least $2.5 trillion in next decade for the meeting out the climate goals which we are having in the mind. And government is doing a lot on that. Currently, if you see, the Ministry of Finance has already set up a climate change finance unit under the Ministry of Finance, the Department of Economic Affairs, where they are doing a lot on the subject. They have created the committees. They are working on the various aspects of the climate financing, where the government, private parties, financial institutions, how all can come together and they can work out such an innovative models where the capacity building, technology, financing, everything can come together at one place, and all the stakeholders can get the advantage of it actually. But it will not only help because we are a developing country. So the development, which are the country which are developed, I think they need to contribute a lot on this climate financing. As per some estimate, at least we need $1 trillion, 83 lakh crore for the from the outside, from developed countries for meeting out these climate goals which we have done. We have prepared actually, which will be helpful to the entire globe, not India, not to India, but to the entire globe also. Our corporates are also contributing a lot. I think every corporate is now thinking to come out with some kind of innovative product, which is a green product, which you will see either in steel, tire, everywhere. When we are talking to the industry, they are discussing that how can be their product be green, which is the climate friendly. So for these kind of the projects, we need the money or funding in advance, which should be long term and which should be at the reasonable cost also. Because unless until it will not be at the reasonable cost, it will be difficult to meet out these goals because we need a lot of money for that actually. So today in today's discussion, we'll try to discuss or we'll try to find out the whatever the challenges are there, how our experts are thinking, how they are seeing in the other countries also. So we have a very good panel. Our panel has vast experience in in the financing side. Simultaneously, they have experience in the climate or green financing also, mainly from the investment point of view. So we have four panel speakers. All are veteran in their field, and they'll cover the different aspects of the innovative financing. So as I told in my starting discussion or starting opening, that the financing is the one tool. But before financing, there are many things which are needed, like certifications, technology, all these preparedness also. So all these things are, I think, required first. Then the financing will come in the picture, right? Kind of products also. So we'll discuss from our panel that what are these areas which need to be taken up first, then the financing will come in the picture. So friends, I would like to thank you to all of you for joining with us from the different part of the globe on this today's webinar, where we are trying to discuss on the green financing or climate financing topic, which is very important for all of us actually. Be whatever we are doing or whatever everybody doing a little in the global this climate goals, meeting out the climate goals or climate financing, we are not doing for ourselves, we are doing for our next generation also. So that is very, very important that we are saving our future by doing this. So although we are a very small this is a very small contribution in the overall the climate financing discussions, but we are doing today. But I think every discussion will help, or every debate or discussion will help to find out solutions for the stakeholders, whether it's the government or the private corporations or the academia and other stakeholders also. So I'll stop my deliberation here, and now I would like to invite our panel speakers. Those are expert, and they are eagerly waiting for their deliberation. So I have, and I would like to thank you to all the panel speakers for joining with us at very short notice from their busy schedule also. So as Resurgent India, we would like to recognize your contribution or your presence in this discussion. And so, friends, we have Madam Dharani Mathur. She is having vast experience in the topic on the for climate financing side. She was in IFC and she is working as a freelancing consultant on the sustainable and climate financing. So first of all, Madam, thank you very much and welcome to you in this today's discussion. And your deliberation is will be very very important for us. So we would like to understand from you, or we'd like to know from you basically your journey in this subject last 10-12 years, what I was seeing in your profile. Then we have some basic questions which we like that we can address these questions. The first question which we have, this is basically what are the prevailing trends and recent developments in innovative climate finance methods, and how are they help in the global progress towards achieving resilience against climate change and fostering low carbon development. So if you can cover up this question where we would like to understand what are the recent development in the innovative climate financing and how are they progressing. So over to you, and thank you very much, ma'am, for joining with us.
Thank you, Mr. Agarwal, and thanks everyone for joining today. Very quickly on my journey, I spent over a decade, almost 13 years at IFC, and while my background is in the law, and I've been a practicing lawyer, a lot of time at IFC was actually spent on strategy and execution, as well as in the authorizing environment. So this is also during my time at Harvard as well. Work at the intersection of law, economy, policy was a personal interest. So I took that into what I did at IFC. In this context, I had the good fortune of being able to co-author the Blended Finance for Climate Investments report that IFC just released. This is really a topic very close to my heart. But I'm going to jump right into the question that you posed, Ashish, and I think it's a good one. I think it's important to set the context and understand, what are the trends that are driving this conversation. I think the first thing is just to understand that the scale of it is just staggering. There's a 2030 target, and like you already said, in order to just reach the 2030 target, there is the numbers are staggering and they're different depending on how you slice and dice it. But for example, a climate policy initiative report says that you need to ramp up climate investment by 590% in order to reach what is committed internationally for 2030. And then, of course, there's the 2.5 trillion number to reach net zero by 2070. So the numbers are just staggering, and there's not much time left. So we're almost halfway through this decade. So it's that, I think, the first thing. The second thing, you have to juxtapose this with, fiscal tightening, right? Exacerbated by COVID, the geopolitical situation on multiple fronts. So there's that. And then you have advanced economies like the US and in the EU enacting these very bold and big measures. There's the US Inflation Reduction Act, there's the EU Green Deal, offering massive incentives for investment in the decarbonization and emission-free story of those economies. And all of these incentives and all of these measures basically move investments to those economies and move them away from developing and emerging economies like ours. Then you have measures like the EU CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which is going to have a massive impact on exports, especially in India's export competitiveness. It can obviously also be seen as an opportunity to justify decarbonization plans, those costs to your boards. So there's that. And finally, there's this whole, I think Avishkar is obviously a pioneer in this field, but there are the bigger investment, the old traditional private equity funds that are jumping into the fray. Morgan Stanley just announced its 1GT fund, and this is it. I think there's a lot. What this signals to me is that there's a lot of money there. that is focused on climate finance. It sees it not just as the right thing to do for our future generations, but also as something that needs to be done. There's a commercial, clear story there. And then there's, the whole MDB revamp. All the multilateral development banks that were traditionally at the forefront of this, they've been told that they need to up their game and essentially do more with less with their money. And this then leads us to the whole catalytic and blended finance story, which has sort of become, there's this whole clarion call for doing more with less funds. So if you put this all together, what this says to me is that the bottom line is that there are pools of funding available, but they'll obviously move to where the conditions are most suitable. And then you have measures like the IRA and the EU Green Deal that will pull them away from developing countries like ours. So if we do need to ensure that those inflows come into our country or into emerging economies, we need to focus like you said, you need to create this environment that ensures financing happens. And I think for that, India needs a playbook. And this has been a pet topic of mine. You actually have to have a clear playbook, not these sort of reactive or piecemeal legislation. Some of them are great. I mean, the Green Hydrogen Mission, all of that, quite forward thinking in their approach. But again, it remains kind of siloed. I think you need a playbook that applies to all regulators and that's seamless and that aligns everyone's mission towards it's almost like a lighthouse that aligns everyone's mission towards in one direction. So I'll stop there in terms of trends and leave it to any of you who have questions.
Thank you so much. I think so. From your deliberation, we can understand that a lot of financial institutions are there. They are ready to fund this kind of requirement, but they are waiting for the right kind of ecosystem. But I believe, and once the ecosystem will be there, the funding will not be a challenge. I think the funding is available, penalty or maybe the huge amount actually. So that's good. Actually, the opening is very, very good. Our panel speakers are having this view that whatever the funding requirement is there, that can be met out, but we need to create an ecosystem so that the confidence will be built up among the financial institutions or the investors. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much for the deliberation. And so, friends, now we have Ankit Kedia. Ankit basically is quite young and energetic, and he's running a venture capital fund, where their focus is on the climate financing or climate investments. So first of all, Ankit ji, welcome to you in this webinar, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
So Ankit ji, we'd like to understand the fund Capital A, how it is supporting the climate goals or climate financing requirement, and what kind of organizations you are funding. So you are the startup space or you are the later stage funding. That's one thing. Other than that, as an investor, how can India foster innovation in the green financing sector to introduce a wider array of financial products tailored to different types of green projects and investment? So mainly the question is basically innovation in green financing sector by way of technology and these things. And the another question which we have from you, this is from an investor's point of view, how are the regulatory and policy changes in India influencing the growth and investment potential of both two-wheeler or EV financing, basically in all segments of EV financing, which is, I think, a new subject. A lot of it is happening basically. So if you can cover up these two questions and can give you some background about your fund also, what kind of investments you are doing. So over to you, and thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ankit Kedia. We are a Bangalore-based early-stage VC firm. It's a 250 crore fund, and we started close to now almost 3 years ago, and largely invest in climate and fintech This covers 80% of our concentration in terms of investment thesis. And balance 20% is everything B2B or everything consumer internet or consumer tech, not really on the CPG side of things. When we started 3 years ago, our premise was very clear that we will go after both these sectors. Fintech, because fintech is fairly evolved, there has been a lot of learnings already. The country has gone through a massive evolution of how the landscape changed from what it was in 2008 to what it is now in 2020. And we said that the underwriting of risk in terms of investments will be fairly lower because there is a enormous amount of understanding. And climate, which is the blue-eyed boy of the town, everyone seems to be talking about climate. Obviously, there are a lot of seasoned investors who have been very early believers and supported the climate investment way before we started. So we said that let's pick up that sector because things will get unpackaged in the next 5 to 10 years, and a lot of patient capital will be required. So that's the background of Capital A. Prior to this, my family and I ran Manjushri Technopack, which we exited to Kedara and Advent in 2 private equity investments. Our current investments in the climate, we started with the entire EV and mobility sector, where we said that everything ancillary to manufacturing of EV or parts of EV, we are going to go after them. And that's how we started our first investment, and also in the charging or the swapping infrastructure. So one of our first investments was in a company called ChargeUp, which is into battery swapping. On the charging infra, our thesis was that this is ultimately going to be a big boys game, because in a country like India, where we have so much complexities of real estate and power and whatnot, and with the utilization of only 20% in the charging infrastructure, it was going to be very difficult for anyone to make money. Ultimately, it will become an acquisition game. And then we followed it up with investments in the powertrain sector, where there were startups working on powertrains for LCVs or 2-wheelers or 3-wheelers. And the entire, the mid-motor drives and the DMS systems, there's a company called Entupal that we have invested in, which has recently forged a JV with another company to manufacture these parts. So we said that if we go after the OEMs, an early stage fund like us, our $1 million check is not going to be enough for them to set up a factory and start manufacturing or doling out thousands of bikes every month. But can we do something for the ancillaries which are coming up? Can we do something on the BMS? Can we do something on the battery side? Can we do something on the simulation technology? I think that was the underlying premise on the EV side. Apart from that, we do deep tech. We're currently supporting a company where they're trying to drive solar efficiencies. And obviously, a very interesting space on the climate financing, where again, we feel that traditional means of capital from banks or NBFCs are not easily available to residential solar rooftop solar projects. And company that we believed in almost 2 years ago, which started out as a BNPL for various sectors, has picked up solar to be one of its core areas, company like Credit Fair, which continues to, go deeper in that space. And because India is such a massive geography, each state, each market has its own dynamics, and penetration in one zone itself takes a lot of time. Hopefully, by the end of the next couple of years, I think there will be more and more more and more people who will be able to underwrite these loans in a much better way. That broadly is our thesis on climate, Anish. On your final
Okay.
question on what could foster innovation,
Yeah.
I think it's very important for, the government recently worked on a deep tech policy and they released it. I think that was a very progressive move for many investors because that, what, for example, when COVID happened and the government opened up the entire space tech or came up with that space tech policy, which is why we see so much action in early stage startups despite a conventional body like it's been existing for the longest time. I think creating a regulatory environment that encourages innovation is paramount right now. Anyone, working on the regulatory frameworks, the policymakers, they have to work with uh, entrepreneurs to create policies. They can't come up with policies on their own. The other thing we had a bit of a, a slightly different spin also is everything revolves around financing in this climate space. And is there any way that we can leverage financial or fintech to develop some digital platforms or applications that can connect green projects with potential investors? There are a couple of interesting folks that they are building around this space, but I think it needs some work around over there. Another way was, establish credit guarantee mechanisms to reduce risk associated with anything investment in green, as long as there are people who can take bold moves to invest in this space, should be also enjoying some kind of immunity. That's the other thing that I felt while following all the law of the land. And again, monitoring and reporting of any green finance initiatives will require a certain framework, will require certain mechanisms in place. So I think those are broadly my points on how one can work on some innovations in the green finance industry.
Okay. Thank you so much. I think you are very well covered. So I think from your discussion, your deliberation, you could come out. The one thing is which is very, very, very important that the all the stakeholders should be the part of the policy process actually. So which is a very, very good suggestion also. And I think government is already this process that they have set up the climate change finance unit, where the different committees are there from the different sectors also, different kind of players also. So they are taking suggestions, they are involving them, and then they are working on the different policies on that. So that is a good thing. And then the another suggestion which you have given, this credit guarantee scheme, I think. So this will also helpful, but this kind of scheme, credit guarantee scheme cannot be of the huge amount of the investment, the money which can be committed from the credit guarantee schemes. So we have IFC also, we discussed with them because most of the developmental financial institutions are having these kind of solutions, innovative solutions where they are giving credit guarantees, and on that basis the financial institutions are funding, where this is a low cost funding also, and this can be done faster also. So thank you, Ankit ji. I think you have slides, so I believe that I'll not be in a position to continue for a long time. I'll request if you can continue for maybe some more time also, that will be helpful.
I would have loved
So,
to, but I think today in Bombay, there is some problem of train cancellations and there is too much traffic on the road. So I apologize. I may have to drop off early. I
No issues. No issues. You please carry on, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And you please carry on. Thank you for your deliberation. Thank you once again. So friends, now we have another expert with us, Mr. Ashish Patel. He's co-named. I'm also Ashish. So Ashish ji, the managing partner of a fund called Aviskar Capital. and he is heading that fund in Africa. So, Ashish ji, first of all, congratulations for this Africa which you are doing actually, and uh, we would like to welcome you and thank you for the joining with us from Nairobi. In spite of the time zone difference is there, and you are with us. So, Ashish ji, would like to understand this whatever the fund you are running, this climate fund, how it is different from the normal venture fund or the private equity fund, and what particularly what kind of investments you are doing from this fund? As Ankit ji has also told that he is focusing more on EV side, electric vehicle. So he is covering the entire ecosystem of electric vehicle, the charging stations, swapping, powertrain, and everything. So we'll be happy to know from you about that. And then we have some questions. We'll be happy if you can cover these questions. So the first question, which we would like to ask from you, is what are the existing gaps are there in traditional climate financing methods? Uh, 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 what are the basically gaps in the traditional climate financing method, and what are the opportunity to for innovations in this kind of climate financing? So how one is that the traditional financing method will be sufficient, or what are the innovations are required in these methods so that the required funding can be available to the different projects and the different requirement also. The second question is what are the most promising trends and emerging technology in the electric vehicle sector in India? Although you are covering Africa, if you can cover up this question, and how do these development impact the attractiveness of EV investment in the next 2 3 years? So these two questions are there, and one more thing that like in India, government had made it compulsory for the top listed companies to be to disclose or to I think to declare in their annual report the ESG policy. So such kind of developments are there in other part of the countries also. The kind of mandatory requirement for the ESG practices and all. And over to you, sir. Please cover for your deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Agarwal. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. And do excuse my cold. So hopefully I'm clear. So to start
You are
with
clear,
your last question first. Yes. So for example, Kenya has implemented ESG disclosures for all publicly listed companies on the Nairobi Stock Exchange for the last 2 years. Similar emphasis are also happening in Europe and the UK as well. So I think the general trend of environmental and social reporting and governance is something that's starting across the world as more and more public opinions weigh in on public markets around the not just the sustainability, but also the goodness of a company with the products and services that it provides. Just a little bit on my fund. We set up the fund, the ESG First Fund, which is an Africa-Asia fund. We also invest into India, primarily to address environmental issues and social issues, right? And for the sake of today's conversation, I'll focus a little more on the environment rather than the social side. And we came up with a thesis of this fund on the back of what we saw as mega trends happening globally, particularly in the West, where the youth has been driving a lot of the sustainability debates, right, as opposed to the elders. And the youth is where a lot of the population voting is now happening. And you can see in main continental Europe, as well as the UK, some of the most socially acceptable parties, such as the Green Party, etc., are taking more and more votes in terms of what they want to see the country stand for. And that is leading to quite a lot of legislative changes that you've seen. For example, the Supply Chain Act of Germany, which is now beginning to flow into the EU later this year, which will make it compulsory for European corporates that are selling any product, whether it's made domestically or imported, to demonstrate that they understand the complete supply chain from both the social aspects and the environmental aspects, right? So what we recognized is that whilst there's a lot of goodness in what the governments are trying to do, there will be a direct impact on the small and medium enterprises across the world that are acting as suppliers, either as final products or inputs for products into the West. And obviously, this trend is not just restricted to the West. You're beginning to see the same trend in Japan, in Singapore, and certain levels of reporting have already started in places like India, Kenya, Tanzania, etc. The second emphasis that we said is that, look, there are two approaches to climate, right? One is the approach that we all talk about, climate financing, big projects, energy, etc. But there is also a significant amount of climate change that can be done through micro policies around helping small and medium enterprises change the way they do business in order to change or reduce the amount of carbon emissions. Give you practical examples would be recycling of steam for apparel manufacturer. Apparel manufacturing is extremely energy heavy. Helping them understand the benefits of recycling energy, using of solar energy, will actually reduce the carbon footprint, which goes a long way around carbon mitigation strategies on a global basis. And of course, this has to be complementary to the general debates that we are all having about carbon financing for the mega projects, the larger projects across the world. So our fund is focused primarily on financing small and medium enterprises in sectors that have a higher environmental footprint in general, such as apparels, agriculture, logistics. Helping finance these businesses so that they upgrade their quality of management of carbon emission, and thereby becoming a lot more sustainable over a period of time using the capital that we have for longer term projects. And that's what we are kind of, very much focused on. But what we do, we've recognized that we cannot do this in isolation, right? There has to be an entire ecosystem that needs to be brought in, as I think Dharini kind of alluded to before, where whilst we work at the micro level, there needs to be macro policies that are influenced both by domestic playbooks. India, Kenya needs one as well. Every country needs a playbook around carbon emission and sustainability. And those playbooks need a component of self-financing from within the country and financing from abroad, right? So I think there was some debates that we've had around where is that money going to come from. There is debates around, can we, should the West be paying for certain amounts of the emission that have already taken place, etc. But whilst these debates happen, and with respect, time is clicking or ticking along, not clicking, but definitely ticking along. And one thing we don't have is we don't have too much time to solve the climate issue. And therefore, having domestic policies which are dependent a lot more on domestic capital, I think will have to play an integral part of the solution, as opposed to continuing to look to the West for climate financing problems at either in India or in Kenya or wherever that may be. And therefore, insufficient funding continues to be a common theme across all countries. And that also is the case for Europe, because whilst we talk about climate financing from new projects, Europeans are struggling with how do you continue to shift away from polluting industries such as coal-based power plants in Germany and France to potentially nuclear-based. And is nuclear the right path to go by, or should we go to wind? Is there enough wind power that can be generated, or do we go to venture, which is where capital A comes in on new types of technology to produce new power? But can we do that in a time frame that allows us to stay within the limits of COP26? So I think insufficient funding is clearly a problem that we have. How do we catalyze that is going to be through the part of the question that you've asked, which is, we need mechanisms for risk mitigations, thereby allowing the private sector to participate, right? Private sector is going to be instrumental in solving a lot of the problems in the developing countries, right? So for example, in Kenya, governments generally don't have sufficient budgets to take on large clean energy projects. We need to catalyze private sectors, pension money. How do we do that? And that can only be done through some level of risk mitigation that allows private sector to earn a level of return for the types of risk that they're taking on, either through insurance policies, first loss policies, and there are a variety of different mechanisms that we've seen in the market that are generally being quite successful, but there aren't enough of them, and there's certainly not enough discussions and talks at the domestic level in our markets. A lot of these discussions tend to happen at the World Bank level or the IFC level, but they somehow don't tend to percolate down to where the rubber hits the road. And then I think access to finance, as Utif was referring to, I think is a critical component, because a lot of our markets continue to be reasonably rural in nature. These markets not only require a level of education at the ground grassroots, but they also require levels of financing or access to financing. So, Kenya has been very successful, as has Uganda and certain other parts of Africa, around solar lanterns, where, it's on a pay-as-you-go basis, which has not only provided energy in parts of rural Africa where grids are not available, but has also allowed energy or lights in a very sustainable zero carbon, well, it shouldn't be zero carbon because manufacturing of those lanterns is carbon emitting, but certainly a much lesser carbon emission that would have been using alternative sources of energy. So I think if you kind of backtrack and see the progress that we are making, I would say that in our markets we are making substantial progress, perhaps not at the pace we need to be making progress. The pace is slow, but we're certainly seeing governments talking about it, government policies aimed around it. So Kenya today, for example, is, I think, in the top 3 countries of the world where I believe up to 40% of our national power is coming from renewable power, which is a huge, is a huge credit to Kenya. These are policies that were set about 10 years ago. So I would say, quite a forward-thinking policy that they'd put in place. To debates that we've had earlier in our conversation around charging infrastructure. So I know there's a lot of debates going on in India, in Kenya, around how do we make an infrastructure that allows EV vehicles, whether it's 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers, or 4-wheelers, to be able to charge and therefore replace petrochemical as a way to infuse to change the way we mobilize ourselves. And I think I'll finally say that there isn't a single bullet that's going to solve this problem, right? So EV is going to solve it for short to medium distances. EV will probably not solve the debate for us on long distance air travel. Air travel today is one of the largest polluters. So in fact, if you kind of break down where is the pollution coming from, it's some of the very basic industries: air, steel, cement. And these are the industries that need to be tackled. And I think, there will be other solutions such as green hydrogen and others, which is an area that we're heavily investing into as well, which will play a role in changing the way energy is not only produced, but also used. So I'll just stop there in case there are any questions or clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Ashish. I think very well covered about your perspective from the African countries' point of view, where you are, and the global point of view also. And then one good thing which you have told, there should be some ecosystem for risk mitigation, the funding actually, which is a very, very important point, because all funding agencies want to fund these kind of projects. So as you told, either the insurance policy should be there, it should be friendly policies from the climate funding point of view, or maybe the first loss guarantee by the government different government, various government built up in the system. So this will, I think, bring a lot of confidence of the financing agencies, whether the funds, private equity fund, venture funds, or the lending institutions also. And then one more thing which you have told, that everybody has to contribute in the overall requirement of this global the climate change. So MSME will also play an important role. We have given one example, there's recycling of the steel, huge recycling of the steel also can. So these, there can be such many examples which need to be think of and then implemented also. So thank you very much. I think you have very well covered your topic, and I believe that our audience will get the advantage of it. Friends, now we have a very important speaker with us, Mr. Sayyed. He is veteran, and he is working in IFC as a lead for green building in South Asia. So although we have covered detail about the various various industry which are renewable or EV and all, but the green buildings or real estate is another, I think, area which need to be discussed and debated, because this is the I think largest employment generator, the real estate sector actually, and the entire economic growth is also dependent on the real estate growth also. So when we are going towards this climate financing, I think green financing or green building financing is also important. So first of all, Mr. Sayyed, thank you very much for joining with us. Rather, you are instrumental in last meeting Mumbai with you. You have given me the idea that why can't you organize such kind of program where you will be happy to come and we can invite other speakers also. So thank you for giving me that idea also. So, sir, we would like to understand as this project lead for green building in South Asia, basically what is the role which you are playing in the this ecosystem? That will be important for all of us to know, because IFC is a very large organization and developmental institution also. Then we have some questions from you. So the first question which you'd like to understand from you, which is what kind of green financial products are available in India now, because you are working in India and IFC, and how are these better for the consumers and the investors? And the second question which we like to understand from you, what does one need to do to access climate financing for their building project? What is the criteria for such building? So I think what I understand that for any building to be green, that there is some certification is required.
Yeah.
Not only building, large building is already been happened. Suppose I am having my house, how it can be a green house actually? Who will certify it? How it will be funded as a green financing also. So over to you, and thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Ashish, and good afternoon, everyone. So as you rightly said, IFC, the World Bank Group, is doing a lot of investments in climate. And this is part of the mandate that we've received from our management from the 180 plus countries that kind of own the World Bank Group. And we have been mandated to have at least 35%, and that number keeps going up, 35% of our investment volumes be focused on climate. But if you look at the real estate investments, my understanding is over the last couple of years, 100% of our investments is now in projects that are meeting a certain minimum climate standards, which typically means they are certified green as per some of the internationally accepted certifications, including our own certification called EDGE. So as you rightly pointed out, my focus is on buildings, so I'll talk primarily about buildings and what kind of standards, what kind of requirements are typically needed for climate finance, for accessing climate finance. So in India, for example, in the last 1 year, IFC has invested more than $1 billion in green buildings across different stakeholders and in different ways. So we provide loans, we provide equity, we also do risk sharing facilities, we do green bonds, and something new that we are starting now, which is sustainability linked finance. So sustainability linked finance would not be for a specific initiative or a specific project, but it would be to a company based on a certain KPI. and that KPI could be climate related. In most cases, it is like GHG emissions, carbon emissions, for example. Based on your current carbon emissions, if you're able to cut it down by X%, 50%, let's say, by a specific year, then the terms of the finance change. And if you're not able to meet the standard, then there is another impact on that. So it kind of performs, it kind of incentivizes or rewards better performance, improved performance over time. And that's something new that we're just starting to do. We've done it in a few other countries. In India, we just starting with a few companies, and hopefully we'll have more examples when we speak next. As I said, we are doing a lot of funding on buildings. This is either done through direct funding. The key sectors that we are focusing on is affordable housing. We have also done a lot of logistics investments, warehousing, etc., hospitals, hotels, and some of these are retrofits as well. So we're not just doing greenfield projects, but we are also investing in retrofits, improvement of those projects so that they meet a certain performance standard, energy efficiency, or climate or water standards. And we also invest through financial institutions, meaning local financial institutions, banks, and housing finance companies, where we are providing finance, and so that they could on lend to their customers who are either building green or purchasing green homes, and in most cases. And again, this is focused on affordable low-income housing. And just recently, the last year or so, we've started to focus even on individual self-built houses, which surprisingly nobody had really touched. Because if you look at the total construction happening in India, 40% of all housing being built across India is still people building their own houses. So the numbers are huge, and the impact was also massive. But we were not able to touch it because we didn't really find a good way to do it. So now we've started to work on that as well in partnership with several housing finance companies. So the work that we're doing it did not really start in a vacuum. Because the awareness of climate finance, the awareness of the standards, or even the availability of the right standards that would be needed to access that finance was in some cases missing in the markets that we are active in. So we started off in our early years, about 10 years ago, by doing a lot of policy work, by doing a lot of awareness activities, training at all levels. This includes developers, investors, bankers, even architects, engineers, students, going down to that level. And of course, investing ourselves. We worked with standard bodies, standard setting bodies, internationally accepted standard bodies like ICMA and the Climate Bonds Initiative and GRESB and others, so that we could align our standards with theirs. So that if a project is meeting standard that we've said, they are able to meet those other global standards, because we can only invest so much. But we want a massive change. We want to mainstream the market towards green. So we want others to invest there as well. So helping them meet those standards is very important. So we have developed some of our own standards and methods to achieve those standards. One key tool or mechanism that we have developed is called EDGE. EDGE is a certification system for buildings that evaluates a building's performance on energy consumption, water consumption, and the embodied carbon of the construction materials, meaning the manufacturing energy of the construction materials. So if the standard is set at the normal country baseline level, if the building is at least 20% better than that baseline standard, then we say it is meeting our green building standard. Then, of course, there is a whole auditing and verification process that happens. And this is aligned with all major climate finance standards globally. So that means if a project gets EDGE certification, then they can possibly get finance from companies like Standard Chartered, HSBC, HDFC, SBI, and a few others. And we have a lot of our advisory clients going there and getting that finance. So in terms of the benefits, the key benefits that we see is future proofing, because a lot of changes are happening, as Ashish was mentioning. A lot of regulations are coming in India as well. SEBI has started asking for ESG reporting, and ESG reporting, I believe, is just the first step, is the foundation for stricter regulation that come in. Now we're just asking to report data. That data will then be mandated, or there will be regulations based on that data, on certain thresholds that are being met or not being met. So future proofing is one important benefit, that if we start to predict the performance of our buildings and improve them now, then they don't have the risk of getting obsolete. Then, of course, the buildings that meet these standards are better buildings, more comfortable buildings. They are more resilient to things like climate change. They have lower operating cost. And that too is changing because the tariffs are going up. In most cases, the electricity cost is going up, the water cost is going up. And having our buildings more efficient means you have less operating cost as you go along. And then a lot of preferences of the consumers, of the buyers, the tenants, the owners are changing. So if you see, most international companies and even some of the larger Indian companies are just going into green buildings. They are renting out, they are leasing out, or buying only green buildings. They don't go for non-certified buildings anymore. And in case they want to raise funds, then also provide some added benefits, because they can possibly get some better financing in that case. So to answer the last part of your question on how do they get access to this climate finance? So I think the first thing we need to look at is, what really is green? Is there a universal standard? So as I was mentioning, that we have made that attempt to put in a universal standard, because all major climate finance companies, or climate finance standards rather, are focusing primarily on carbon. Unfortunately, a lot of the green rating systems also were not looking at carbon. So we've deliberately focused on that. How do we reduce the operational carbon of a building and the embodied carbon of a building? Firstly, how do we even measure? That's not an easy task. So we have developed our own software, a free online software that we've made it open to anyone at edgebuildings.com. Anybody could go in, select any building around the world globally. Every single country in the world is represented there. In India, there are 65 cities that's data is in there. You plug in your building details, and you're able to figure out what the baseline is. And then you can figure out how to actually be at least 20% better than baseline using various combination of technical measures. The software gives you the impact on the capex and the impact on the opex as well, so you can figure out your payback. So the financial calculations are also very transparent. And lastly, the carbon emissions are also reported, so you can take this to your ESG reporting, take this to your next investor, and try to get better financing from them. So this whole process was very complicated, used to be quite complex. Now we try to simplify it without really lowering the standards. And one last thing I would like to add here is that a lot of our activities so far have been focused on mitigation, on how do we reduce climate change. But the fact is, climate change has already started to happen in a lot of places, as evidenced by the heat waves, by the floods, by the hurricanes that they increase their kind of periodic occurrence. So how do we deal with that? We need our buildings to be more resilient as well. That too would be included as part of climate change impact, or kind of activities related to climate mitigation or climate adaptation. So some of our investments are now going into that as well. And again, there was a gap in the market on what really is a climate resilient building. What's the standard? So we've come up with a standard for that. This is a system called Building Resilience Index, BRI. We've developed a system of like a rating, ABCD kind of rating. Like when you buy an air conditioner, it says ABCD rating. Similarly, we've come up with a rating for a building on the resilience to different kind of climate disasters, natural disasters. And if you're meeting a certain minimum standard, let's say AA, then that means your building will withstand some of the most severe floods and landslides and earthquakes, etc., etc. So feel free to explore that. Again, that the software is completely free of charge. It's at resilienceindex.org. So we're trying to do both. We're trying to set the minimum standards, trying to establish an easy way to meet the higher standards, and then investing in some of those projects. And the ones that we are not investing, we are actually working with other investors, other climate finance standards, so that the project does get invested somehow. I'll stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Syed. I think you are doing a lot actually, which is not known to everybody actually. So it's good that you are here and you are giving the complete perspective from the IFC point of view. Being a developmental institution, you are not only funding, you are bringing them to the level where it can be funded for the green financing or climate financing point of view actually. So that's good, I think, and BRI standard and all these are the things which I think many people are not aware. And one good thing which you have told that individual housing can be green housing actually. I think which need to be understood more basically. So we have many companies which are into a housing finance business, affordable housing finance business. Those are our clients also. We are helping them. So when we were discussing with them, they said, how it can be possible that my borrower house, which is in some rural place or some tier 3 cities, how it can be a green house, and how logistically how we can do it also, because it cannot be manually done, which is very, very difficult. So there is any technology which you have developed, or how this can be done so that they can come to you, and what are the advantages? Suppose they got the certification for greenhouse, individual house. So do they have any advantage in terms of the price, or whatever the interest costs, or maybe the longer duration funds and all? So if you can cover up, then it will be helpful.
Sure, I'll try to answer it very briefly.
Yeah.
So yes, that was a very challenging market, and the way we approached it is firstly by simplifying the criteria. How do they become green? So we did an extensive survey to understand what kind of houses are being built, and then another set of survey to figure out what kind of technologies, equipment, material, or design changes could be implemented to make this house meet the green standard. The same green standard we use for larger developer-built housing. The 20% reduction in energy, water, and material embodied carbon. What are the lowest cost items? So these are simple things that we've come up with, things like reflective paint on the roof, the right kind of ceiling fans, 5-star rated, the right kind of water fixture, the right kind of window shading, etc., etc. And these measures typically cost for a house anywhere only between 15 to 30,000 extra. So even if it's like a 15 lakh loan, they're only paying 15,000 extra to make it green. And then we've tied up with housing finance companies so that when they provide the loan, they're also providing some technical support and advice, because most of the homeowners don't really have a good understanding of the technologies and the design capabilities that are needed. So the housing finance companies, we train them, we equip them with the right tools and materials so that they go and guide these people. And then the whole certification process has also been streamlined so they can get it at a very minimal cost. And yes, it does help in many cases. We have tied up with 5 housing finance companies right now in India, and most of them are offering discounts on the interest rate for these certified homes.
Okay, that's good, I think. So it is beneficial even for the housing finance company and the individual house owner also. And they are contributing in the climate goals also. A small the pyramid of the bottom of the pyramid, they are contributing in the climate goals also. So thank you very much. It's a great deliberation, sir. And so now I'll come to Dharani ma'am again on the very important question, which is related to the subsidies. This thing, how do the environmental subsidies such as for renewable energy impact for growth of sustainable industries and how can government optimize these incentives, and what are the regulatory and institutional barriers currently. So basically, the question is related to the different subsidies which are there, which are sufficient or not sufficient, and what are the regulatory barriers for getting or receiving the subsidies also, and this traditional financing versus the sustainable financing, how it can be changed. So over to you, ma'am. We can cover this question.
Sorry, while I'm mindful of time, so I'll be as quick as I can.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
My idea of a playbook. I think, all of these are tools, whether you talk of subsidies, you talk about taxes, you talk of, risk mitigation products. These are all tools that are available to any country to use and to sort of use as a lever to increase or, to emphasize certain aspects. So if you have the playbook right and aligned to India's priorities and India or any other country's priorities, I think all of this will then fall in place. So I just want to say that for any playbook, there are kind of three things in my mind. There's this process, there's first priorities, and then there's the process, and then there's products. And all of this kind of ties into the policy. And by that, I simply mean that you need to understand what in any country's priorities are. And for example, in India, I think it's alluded to before, decarbonization is very important. There's the transport sector, there's housing that Atif spoke about as well, and then there's also the agricultural sector, which contributes to a large part of the emissions. There's adaptation. So I think the idea is that you, as the playbook sort of it starts off with identification of priorities, and then the process. And I think Ankit mentioned this before, the process of involving all stakeholders. I think this is done far too little. People who actually practice either financing or investing are not as involved in policy making as they should be, and therefore policy really needs to be informed by real practice. And I think that process is beginning to happen, and especially in this country and in others around the world. And the last thing is products. And on products, I think very quickly, if you look at India, for example, I think right now we do, hydrogen, or we have sort of a siloed approach to enhancing investments or enhancing, incentivizing certain kinds of products. I think it needs to be done in a more cohesive way. And so, for example, if you take blended finance, and I think this is a very important point that Ashish talked about earlier as well, you can't look overseas constantly for pursuing this notion of the just transition and finance coming from elsewhere. You need to get to this 2.5 trillion somehow, and the clock is ticking. There's public funds, which are not that many, but there's also philanthropies. There's a lot of domestic HNI capital. How do you leverage this? How do you leverage this concessional capital? I think concessional or catalytic finance is an important aspect. But again, then you have barriers such as in the SEBI doesn't allow for an AIF in India, it doesn't allow junior senior structures. You need junior senior structures to de-risk and bring in commercial capital. Unless you de-risk or you enhance the returns of commercial capital, it's not going to come in. So especially for nascent technologies where perceived risk is quite high, gestation periods are quite high, you absolutely need to be able to do structures that bring in concessional capital that de-risks or mitigates or enhances the return to commercial capital. Again, you need risk mitigation products which allow for foreign capital to sort of provide. So even DFIs, and for my time at IFC, and the IFC Blended Finance Report alludes to this as well. Our foreign exchange framework, for example, in India doesn't really quite allow for partial credit guarantees, risk sharing frameworks, FLDGs, all of these products. So if you have a playbook that prioritizes financing for climate and has a idea of blended finance, all of this would then fall in place. You need to have equity for an idea, a plan for enhancing equity investments, a plan for enhancing debt investments, risk mitigation. So I really think that you need to keep that in the goal in mind, and then have products that lead into that. So I'll stop there. And lastly, I think taxonomy. I think this has been talked about. I think there there's the Sustainable Finance Task Force in India and similarly in other countries, and there's a debate on whether to adopt existing taxonomies or to come up with your own. My personal view is that harmonized taxonomies will do everybody a whole lot of good. Otherwise, there's far too much transaction cost involved in sort of aligning to different types of taxonomies, especially if you're talking about green, social, sustainable bonds, and increasing inflows, and increasing issuances of such bonds. China has run away with it for now. But if emerging economies elsewhere in Africa and India need to do this, I think harmonized taxonomies will reduce transaction costs and make it far easier for capital to be allocated. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you very much. I think we already, as you told, we have already crossed the time limit. So I'll not take much of the time to wind up the session actually. So I think we had a very good deliberation where all the panel speakers contributed a lot on the topic from their experience point of view, from their organization point of view also. And they have also given the suggestion what to do by the policymakers and the industry also and the other stakeholders. So if I summarize, I think this Rani ma'am has given that the funds are available, institutions are ready to fund, but there is the need of ecosystem where all the stakeholders can come at a single place and they can find out the solution for funding to the industry and the different organizations. And if I see from the KDIG point of view, he has given this that there should be some this thing credit guarantee or the I think industry participation in the policy making actually. So I think it's a good suggestion where the industry participation is there in the early stage of the policy making. I think the policies which are prepared or which are implemented, these will be more industry or investor friendly actually. And that this Ashish ji has given us very good idea that from the investor point of view, the risk mitigation is very, very important actually. If there can be some mitigations, measures are there, I think it will boost up the funding in the climate financing. So like insurance policies or the first loss guarantee, these kind of solutions which he has suggested. And he has given the perspective of the international market also. And Sayedji from IFC has given the complete background of the green building, which is something very innovative which you are doing, and not in India. I think you are doing across the world on the various countries also, and you have already funded almost $1 billion in the green financing side, the building area, and we are reaching to the individual household also. So I think the leaders are taking the lead actually because IFC is a very large institution and they always work on the developmental side. So the other institutions will also follow. I think whatever the lending or whatever the funding you are doing for the sector, the Indian banks and the Indian Developmental Financial Institution will also take the lead. Like SIDBI there in India, IRDA is there, then many other developmental financial institutions are there. There we started because we are connected with all these developmental financial institutions. They have taken the baby steps where they have started funding to these sectors or these companies which are into the climate change or businesses. But still, the lot has to be done because practically, if you see the large funding is not coming. Although we have seen in the renewable energy, lot has been done. Electric vehicle, still a lot has to be done. And on the other areas, I think still is a way, I think way behind. Where the coming time, I believe there'll be the more awareness and the more I think there'll be the more involvement of the industry and the policymakers. As a government, as I told in my initial speech, that government has set up this climate change finance unit, which is itself a complete department, and government is, I think, watching all the development, and they are trying to build up a system where the whatever the requirement of the funding is there, it can be meet out or it can be available to the required participants also. So I believe this discussion will help to the all audience, all the people who have participated, through the Zoom call or through the whatever the other channels, Facebook and the LinkedIn and other social media channels also. And we'll summarize. We'll basically prepare a summary of this discussion. We'll send it to the different stakeholders, the government, the policymakers, the industry also, so that your views should reach to the relevant audience, and they can take the advantage of it, and there should be some performance. So I would like to thank you to all of you for joining with us and sparing your valuable time with us. And thank you very much once again to all of you. And I believe this discussion will help a lot in the overall green financing or innovative financing on the climate financing side. So this can be I think, a small drop in the ocean, but there will be some advantage to some people, and that will be the success of this program. So thank you very much. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.